Yeah, I hear you. I'm a great psychiatrist.
All right, we have some very special people with us today. We're holding here in Megillah, in the Sechta, not in Megillah, in the Sechta Megillah, Daf Zayin Amud Beis 17b, and the Mishnah that we learned says how the Megillah has to be read in order. You can't read the Megillah backwards. You can't put a pasuk or a verse or a chapter later. You can't hear the second half of the Megillah, and then afterwards go and hear the first half of the Megillah. You have to hear the whole thing in order. Shalom Aleichem Reb Leibel, second time today. From there, we extrapolated to as well, Hallel also has to be said in order. Learning that the Hallel is just like the sun and the moon, just like the sun and the moon each have an order. They've never yet switched places. They've never stopped on their own accord. So too, we have to read the Hallel in order, not changing around the order. And we had the Torah Evan and the Magen Avram, which bring down that the theme of Hallel also has a special order. Hallel starts off with when the Jews were in Egypt. They were then B'tzeis Yisrael. Hashem took us out of Egypt. Then Hashem Hayom Rav Hayanos. Hashem split the sea for us. Afterwards, we came into Eretz Yisrael, into Israel, and we had a land. Afterwards, talks about Galus, exile. We say Mina Meitzar, from the depths I call to you, Hashem. Afterwards, we had the times of Mashiach. And afterwards, at the very end, we have the war of Gog and Magog and Keli Ata Vayideka. Finally, we thank Hashem. So the entire Hallel is a journey. For many reasons. You know, if you try climbing, let's say a mountain, a very high mountain, Mount Everest. So in order to get to the top of the mountain, you first have to spend about 2 weeks at mid-camp or base camp, halfway up the mountain. Your body acclimates to the oxygen, has to build red blood cells. For us to go straight to the times of Geula and Mashiach, if we would jump straight into it, it's like taking someone who's not ready and putting him at the top of the mountain. First, we have to get ourselves ready and acclimate to Mashiach. It's a process to go through. And just like the sun and the moon, every single day is a process that goes up and it goes down. So too, during Hallel, we are saying in order to get to the times of Gog and Magog and Mashiach, we have to go through the entire Hallel. Now, we are going to talk about where do we know that Shema has to be said in order. So we started the discussion, but we're going to hopefully go through it today. But we'll go back just one line to the previous Amud. Last line on the page, Yud Zayin Amud Beis. You have an art scroll, it's 17a-4.
17a-4.
Yes, the Gemara will now look for the source that one must say Shema in order. If one said the paragraphs within the paragraphs of Shema out of order, he has not fulfilled his obligation and must say Shema again. To think that it doesn't happen. Last night I was saying Shema with one of my kids by bedtime, and that's exactly what happened. They skip around in Shema. They said the later pasuk, so I said, okay, we skipped that one. So they said that one, and then they went back to Chsaftam. So don't think that it can't happen. It can happen. Kriya Shema. What is a source that Shema must be read in order to fulfill your obligation of saying Shema? There is an obligation twice a day. We must say Shema. Once in the morning, once at night. And the Gemara will bring the source. The Tanya we learned in a Brisa, and we're going to bring a lengthy Brisa with different opinions. So the Gemara says, Kriya Shema kiksava divrei Rabbi. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi holds, and when it comes to saying Shema, you must read it only in Hebrew. You cannot read Shema in a different language. And the sages say, B'chol Lashon, You can say Shema in any language that you understand. My time at the Rebbe, and the Brisa continues. What is the reason of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi that you can say Shema in any language? Amakra, his reasoning is because it says in the verse in Parashas Veschanan, when it says Shema, it says the Hayu Hadvarim Ha'ele, and these words shall be. And it says Al Vavecha on your heart. We brought the Chassidic interpretation. So always have words of inspiration on your heart, always ready. So that way, as soon as your heart opens, then it can enter right away. So these words should be on your heart. And so he learns from the word V'hayu, and it shall be. B'haviyasan Yehu. He extrapolates the word. Read it as two different words. B'haviyasan Yehu. It should be in its exact form, the way it is. Just like it's in Hebrew in the Torah, so too when you say it, it should be in Lashon Kodesh, it should be in the holy tongue. The Rabbanan and the rabbis, my timer, what is their reason for their opinion that you can read Shema in any language that you understand? The Gemara says, "My tamayu amar kra," because the pasuk, the verse of Shema, the very first word is Shema. What does Shema mean? Hear. When you hear something, typically it's in one language that you understand. When you hear something, you could just listen to something. I could listen to some beautiful Italian opera, but if I don't know what the words mean, or I could hear it, a song in English, I understand what it means. So it has to be in a way that you understand. So the rabbis hold that Shema could be said in any language you understand, because you must hear it. Chassidus says Shema doesn't mean only heron, it means der heron. Heron means to hear, der heron means to feel. And Rabbi Yehuda, the Rebbe holds that Shema can only be said in Hebrew. The halacha is that if you said it in any language, you're Yotzei, but you should at least say the first pasuk of Shema and Baruch Shem, say that the minimum in Hebrew.
Now, according to what I read, you're allowed actually to daven in any language as long as you understand it. However, with Hebrew, even if you don't understand a word, you're still Yotzi. Actually, that's what I read.
In Hebrew, you're always Yotzi. In other language, you must understand direct. The rabbis would agree to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi that in Hebrew you will be Yotze if you understand it.
Even if you don't understand it,
right? Even if you don't understand Hebrew, you're still Yotze. Like the Megillah, we brought a teaching before that the Megillah is kosher in always kosher in Hebrew, and in another language only if you understand it. And even then, written on parchment in Hebrew letters by somebody who doesn't understand Hebrew. So there must be they could read Hebrew, but they can't understand it. Continues the Gemara. Yossi, shalom aleichem. Echata.
Bye.
Baruch Hashem. Today we got a Gemara which we have to put on what's called your Gemara cup, your Gemara cap, to pay attention to it. It's going to be a little bit back and forth in today's Gemara. Two opinions we had of Yehuda Hanasi, which says that you can read Shema only in the original way it's written in Lashon Kodesh in Hebrew. And then you have the Chachamim, the sages, would say Shema could be said in any language. The word Shema means to listen in any language that you understand. And Yehuda Hanasi says that the word in Shema, V'hayu hadvar ma'ele, V'hayu means B'haviyasan Yehu in the exact form in the Torah, which is in Lashon Kodesh in Hebrew. So Gemara will now ask, what does each one say about the other one's source? What do they do with that source that they have? So the Gemara asks, the Rabbi Nami, Haksiv Shema, according to Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, it says Shema, which means listen in any language that you hear. What does he learn from the word Shema if he holds that it must be said only in Hebrew? The Gemara answers, Ahumi ba'ilei. He needs it to teach you something else. And this is something very important in davening. Hashmeya la'aznecha ma she'ata motzi mipicha. When you say the words Shema, you have to hear it. You can't just mouth the words of davening. You have to actually say it, verbalize it, Shema Yisrael, that you could hear it. You have to verbalize the words. So to Shema doesn't mean to hear in a way of understanding, meaning in Hebrew, Lashon Kodesh. Rather, he learns that Shema means you have to verbalize what you're saying, that you could hear it in your mouth with your ears. Halacha is that whenever you daven, you have to verbalize it. If you only thought the words of davening, you're not yotze, you've not fulfilled your obligation. Definitely the words of Shema. And the only exception would be if someone has a health issue and unfortunately can't talk or anything like that. And you should hear the words when you're saying it. It says you shouldn't speak so loud that someone more than 4 amas away, more than 6 feet away should hear you. But if someone's next to you and you're saying the words out loud, halacha is you're not allowed to tell them, be quiet, you're disturbing me from davening. Because of this, hashmeya la'aznecha. Shema means listen to what you're saying. You have to hear what you're saying. If one only mouthed the words and did not actually hear what they're saying, they don't have to daven it again. They don't have to say it again. But if they only thought the words and didn't even mouth it with their lips, then they have to say it again. This is in regarding to saying Shema. The other parts of davening, besides Shema and Shemoneh Esrei, if you only thought it, not the best way of doing it, but you don't have to redaven it. But Shema and Shemoneh Esrei, if one did not mouth the words, then they have to say it again. And we learn it from the word Shema, means listen. Listen to the words that you're saying. V'Rabban and Savri and the rabbis, they holds Kimad Maamar Hakari Shema v'Lishmi Elazna Yatsa. If one read Shema but was not able to hear it, he still fulfilled his obligation, and that is a halacha. So l'chatchila, you person, and to begin with, should say Shema loud enough that he could hear it. But if he mouthed the words without hearing it, then he still has fulfilled his obligation. If he did not mouth the words at all, then he has not fulfilled his obligation of Shema, and he must say it again.
Okay, so what if somebody didn't say it, just thought it, but the person next to him was very loud and he heard it? Does he have?
Did that person have in mind to be yotze him? If he had a mind to be yotze him, so that's technically what sometimes will take place by Ma'ariv in the olden times when no one knew. But if the person is someone who's fluent with Shema, he has to say it again to himself.
So the Bal Tefillah, if he told the Bal Tefillah to enunciate correctly and say loudly, then he could be Yotzi on him.
With Shema? That's a good question. Probably you could, but I would have to look into that. Ask your local Orthodox rabbi.
LOR. So he's on vacation right now.
Yeah, Laura says like a medical degree.
He's got his letters, LOR.
The Kaf HaChaim, he was a Sephardi posek from last century, a century and a half ago. So he brings this up. If someone says Shema in a very loud place, and if he tries to hear what he's saying, he's going to have to shout, and it's going to disturb everyone around him. So if there was nobody around him, he could hear what he's saying. But now that there's a lot of noise, he can't hear what he's saying. Has he fulfilled his obligation? So he says it boils down to, does the word Shema mean that you have to hear it? Or Shema means give the possibility of hearing it by saying the word loud enough that if it was quiet, you could hear it. The Avnei Nezer, Sachat Shaver Rebbe, the Rosh Yeshiva in 770, Rebbe Darren, brought about him last week. He was a Talmud of the Avnei Nezer, wrote many deep Sfarim. And he says that Shema and Megillah are very similar. Just by Megillah, if you mouth the words and you did not hear it, you've not fulfilled your obligation. He says by Shema would be the same thing. If you did not actually hear the words, he says you have not fulfilled your obligation. And therefore, you should re-say it again, even if you said it loudly, but you didn't hear it because there was so much noise around. if someone's a cheresh, someone's deaf, so they don't have to say Shema again, because the fact that they don't hear was not a problem with their surroundings, rather it was their own personal thing.
Excuse me, it's interesting because the definition of Shema also means to understand and to internalize, So for example, in Carlin Stolen, everybody screams Shema. So you could be, at the top of your voice and not hear yourself because everybody else is screaming, but at least you know the words that you're saying. So, if you saying Shema is to mamish proclaim the unity of the Eibishter. If you understand what you're saying, even though you may not hear yourself because everybody else is screaming, it seems to me it would be Otzi, no?
Right. So he says you are Yotzi. Yeah, you definitely Yotzi. The question is, do you have to go say it again as a better option?
But you can't, because if you say Shema twice, it's like
Shema 2 times.
Yeah.
I think he's speaking about saying the entire paragraph of Shema, not just the 2 words of Shema. If you're saying Shema Shema twice, it's like you're bringing the halacha, then it says Mashat, you quiet him down, right? Because you're thinking, it makes it sound like there's 2 rishuyas, two gods. Listen. But so that's just interesting halachic things that come out of this halacha. So to begin with, halacha is like the chacham and like the sages over Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, but l'chatchila one should do both. One should try hearing what they're saying, and you should put yourself in a situation, and you don't daven. Try not to put on your talis and tefillin in the middle of Penn Station during rush hour when you can't hear what's going on. Try rather doing it in a shul where you can hear what you're saying, and maybe don't sit next to the air conditioner, next to the the central air vent.
I was thinking nowadays actually with hearing aids, I'm still not. It may still be. I'm thinking you're not obligated to stick a hearing aid in your ear in order to be able to hear actually the Shema. Hashem made you this condition. It's just like, remember, Rabbi Lager in the Shir actually was saying that if someone is they would have children, so they're allowed to go through medical stuff in order to do, but it's not like it's an obligation. So maybe it's the same thing here too, even though you can stick a hearing aid in your ear, but nevertheless, though Hashem made you actually deaf, so therefore actually you're not obligated, but it could be a nice thing for you to hear actually the Shema maybe.
I hear you saying the Shvus Yaakov, my stipler, he has a whole Shiloh tshuva about this. Could the Baal Tekeah, the one blowing the shofar for the shul, could he be somebody who has a hearing aid? Or the chazan in shul, could he be somebody that has a hearing aid? So if you have a person who usually, if you speak in a normal tone of voice, they can't hear, but if you speak very loudly, they could hear. If they're chazan and they spoke and they were chazan in a regular tone of voice, so they for sure can't hear, but everyone else could hear, but they can't. So was everyone else Yotze? Because could he be Yotze everybody else if he himself can't hear? Or in a similar sense, if he can't hear that himself blowing the shofar, could he blow the shofar for everybody else?
Can he be Yotze on hearing and then be Yotze on him saying?
And he says that he has to say it loud enough that he has to hear it himself. And he says, if he says in a regular voice, he can't. But that's how he brings down. So it's similar, I guess, a similar thing of what you're saying.
Yeah, I was thinking actually that it's like maybe actually the deaf person is not obligated to stick a Shem in this way.
So a cherish is pater from all the mitzvahs. The mitzvahs of have a time. So if they're real cherish, right, they're pater from the mitzvahs. Nowadays, with the advent of hearing aids, things might change a little bit. And someone told me once, they remember the Elter Chassid or Bavram Mayar, you might probably remember him, Bavram Drizzen. He was a real, from the old school, one of the great Chassidim, a major Talmud Chacham. He used to travel around to many cities in America. The Rebbe sent him around to be a shadar, which means collect gashmias, collect money, and plant ruchnias. But he became very old, and then he started becoming losing it a little bit. And when he walked around not knowing what's happening, and then suddenly he got a hearing aid, suddenly he was back to himself and he started making farbrengens again and he started giving shurim again. And like he had a tchias amesim. So Baruch Hashem, with today's modern technology, we really could give a lot of new leases on life to many, many people.
I have a brother-in-law who was a mumcha in the sign language
Yeah.
for the deaf,
Mhm.
for hearing impaired. And he teaches them, Chumash and Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. And for many, many years, he used to go to Rabbi Reisman, Nachshir, every Motzei Shabbos, and would interpret for the deaf people that were there. And very often when the city had somebody coming, let's say, one time President Carter came, and another guy, big shot came, and he was the one that was up there with, making.
Yeah.
Those people understood everything that he was saying
Interesting.
with the sign language.
Interesting.
Even though when they spoke, you could tell there was something that was not 100%, but in terms of an understanding,
Mhm.
Sometimes he would lapse and he would speak when he would talk to you. He would speak inside, and you could see there were pieces of the sentences that were missing, and there were things that would
Interesting.
most of the signs from the Torah concepts that are used in Orthodox circles for the hearing impaired, he's the one that made those signs.
Interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
What's interesting is that originally sign language was used, actually was invented for people who could hear, but let's say monks had to do, or let's say if you were spying on behalf of the government, so they had actually sign language you could use. But then later on, actually somebody came up with the idea, wait a minute, why don't we try to make a sign language system for people who can't hear? And that's what's born on modern sign language.
Interesting. Yeah.
he was
Let's
once
continue the
honored,
Gemara.
he was once honored by an organization called Deaf Torah for the Deaf. All he did. So my wife and I, we went there, and have a room full of a couple of hundred people, totally silent. Everybody going like this, and then they had a Rav that was himself hearing impaired. He spoke, and for the benefit of the sign language impaired, they had somebody who translated it into English.
Interesting.
The entertainment like it was a mime. It was unbelievable.
Interesting.
But you can't see when they understood. You can't say a shaita,
Right.
chedesh. Now you can't.
You can't say the same thing of Chedesh. There's difference.
They go up to the Torah. That's because when the guy's reading from the Torah,
Right.
whether they hear it or not, probably they don't. They need somebody they have to
Right.
interpret for them.
Right. That's a good question. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Nami Aksiv Rabbana Nami Haksiv V'hayu. Seemingly, according to the rabbis, it says V'hayu that the words should be exactly as it is written. So, which indicates Shema should be recited only in Hebrew. What do the rabbis do with Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's source? The Gemara answers, from the word V'hayu, it says V'hayu advar ma'ele, and these words, and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said, Rabbi said V'hayu means you must be exactly as it's written in the Torah, you must say Shema in Hebrew. The sages, they say V'hayu means something else. V'hayu means that you should not read Shema out of order. And this is how this Brisa ties in to our Gemara. We said we can't read the Megillah out of order, you can't read Hallel out of order, and according to the Chacham, according to the sages, from the word V'hayu, we learn that you cannot read Shema out of order. Ask the Gemara, V'Rabbi, where does Rabbi learn that from, that you can't read Shema out of order? And the Gemara answers, Midevarim hadevarim. It says over here in Shema, V'hayu hadevarim ha'ele, and these words shall be. It could have just said V'hayu devarim ha'ele, and these words. What's hadevarim? The words. Coming to tell you, it's the words, the way it's written in the Torah, and you have to say Shema the way it's written in the Torah, in order. But you cannot say Shema out of order. So you can't say, well, Shema, V'haftas Hashem Elokecha b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshecha b'chol ma'odecha, u'chsaftam al mezuzah v'secha b'yisharecha, v'hoyu advarim ha'ela. You can't say it out of order. You have to say it in order. You learn it from the extra hey, from the word devarim. And from the Torah, you can learn from every single word. And even Rabbi Kiva would learn from even the crowns on top of the words. Ask the Gemara, Minale v'Rabbanan, what do the rabbis do with that extra hey in the word had-devarim? Rabbi Yehuda Nasi learned that you use that extra hey to teach you. You can't read Shema out of order. The rabbis already learned that from the word v'hayu. So what do they do with that extra hey? The Gemara answers, Dvarim, had-devarim loy mashma lahu. The sages do not regard the extra hey of a word to be significant enough to learn this halacha out of. We can learn other things from Dvarim, had-devarim, but this halacha of that you have to reach, or any halacha, is not significant. The hey is not significant enough, according to them, to learn this halacha. So they say that the hey is not extra. Perhaps it's necessary for the context, but there's no special thing that you learn out of the hay. So that is how the Gemara explains now these two opinions. The opinions of the Chachamim, of the sages, and the opinions of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, if you could read Shema out of order or not. And we said, according to both opinions, you cannot read Shema out of order. And each one learns from a different source. According to the Chachamim, according to the rabbis, they say you can't read Shema out of order from the word that v'hayu and it should be. And according to Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, he learns that you can't read Shema out of order from the extra hey of the word had-devarim, the words that we say in Shema. So next time you say Shema tonight, you can think about it. Shema, you say Shema in any language. V'hayu, and it should be in the order that it said, in the language that it said, had-devarim. Oh, that extra hey, I can learn something. Now every word of Shema has a little more meaning. The Gemara will now attempt that once we establish what the opinion of the Chachamim, of the sages is, perhaps we could make an inference from here to the rest of the Torah. And maybe we can make an inference from Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's opinion to the rest of the Torah as well. We said that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi said, Shema can only be written, can only be said in Hebrew. Right? That was the very end of the previous Amud. Last line. Kriya Shema kiksava divrei Rebbe. Rebbe holds, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi holds, Shema can only be said in Lashon HaKodesh, in the Holy Tongue. So the Gemara will try to infer that, just let's say an example, in Pittsburgh, there was a sign, no turn on red, from this time to this time, by a red light. What could you infer from there? And wherever there's no sign, you are allowed to make a turn on red, correct? Mm-hmm. Otherwise, if somebody's coming to a city, you come from New York City, and over there's no turn on reds. So you come to Pittsburgh, you're not sure of the law, but if you see a sign that says no turn on red by a stop sign, or no turn on red from this time to this time, you could figure out, without even checking out the law by yourself, that wherever there's no sign, you are allowed to make a right on red. So in a similar way over here, Rebbe held, he brought an inference from the word v'hayu. Shema must be said only in Lashon Kodesh, only in Hebrew. The fact that he has to say that Shema is said in Hebrew, we can infer that everywhere else, you don't have to say Lashon Kodesh. The entire Torah could be read in any other language. So maybe on Shabbos, you can read the Torah in English. Maybe because the fact that he says you have to read Shema and Lashon Kodesh, maybe the rest of the Torah, I can infer that you don't have to read the rest in Lashon Kodesh. So says the Gemara, Lema Kasava Rebbe. Let's say that Rebbe holds Kol HaTorah b'Lashon HaKodesh Nemra. That the entire Torah could be written in any language. From Rashi, it seems like when you read the Torah on Monday and Thursday and Shabbos. But seemingly it's hard to understand that because reading the Torah in shul is not a biblical requirement, it's a rabbinical requirement. So we're speaking about there's certain Torah readings that are actually biblical to hear. Namely, two of them here, which is Parsha Zachar, hearing the Parsha of Amalek, the Shabbos before Purim, which we learned about in the first chapter. And also Parshas Para. Before one of the four parshas is before the month of Nisan, we read about the Para Duma to purify oneself from Tumas Mes with the ashes of the red heifer. And that's also a biblical obligation nowadays as well. So there's two different Torah readings which are biblical. The rest of the Torah, which is rabbinical in nature, it was added on by Moshe Rabbeinu on Shabbos, and then Ezra added on Mondays and Thursdays. And Moshe Rabbeinu said that we should read it on Yom Tiv, Shabbos and Yom Tiv, and Mondays and Thursdays is from Ezra, which is the second Beis HaMikdash. So if you read those in a different language, we could say you're Yotze because it's rabbinical in nature, and we're not as strict about the exact wording. But that's according to Tosfos. According to Rashi, even the Torah readings on Monday and Thursday and Shabbos have to be said only in Hebrew. But definitely the biblical obligations, which is the Parsha of Amalek and the Parsha of Para, definitely should be said only in Hebrew. But according to Rabbi Nasi, according to Rebbe, perhaps the entire Torah could be said in any language. Because if the entire Torah should only be written in Hebrew, why did Rebbe need a special teaching to teach you that Shema must be said in Hebrew? Otherwise, don't say anything, and it would have the same law as the rest of the Torah. Just like the rest of the Torah should be Hebrew, Shema should be Hebrew. The fact they're telling me Shema is Hebrew, Lashon Kodesh, means that the rest of the Torah does not have to be said in Lashon HaKodesh. This is how a Gemara had. The lawyers have nothing on the Gemara. The Gemara rejects this argument that the Gemara says it's since when it comes to Shema, the first word of Shema is Shema, which means listen, which infers anything that any language you understand. So therefore, you have to have the word V'hayu. But you don't have to have the word V'hayu to teach you V'hayu that you must say Shema in Lashon Kodesh, in the Holy Tongue, to teach you that everywhere else you could say the Torah in a different language. But rather, in Shema, there's an extra reason why, even if the rest of the Torah should be said in Hebrew, I would think Shema I could say in a different language. Because it says Shema, which means listen in a language you understand. So therefore, we have to have an extra verse to teach you V'hayu, that it should be in the way that it is written. So there's no specific inference that the rest of the Torah has to be said only in Hebrew, or it could be said in any language. That's still up for debate, and you can't infer from here to anywhere else. That's what the Gemara says. And then the Gemara goes to the opposite end of the coin as well, and with this we'll conclude the Gemara. Leima kasavar Rebbe, are we to say according to Rebbe Yehuda Nasi, Kol Torah kula b'chol lashon emra, entire Torah, for an opposite end of the coin, which the rabbi said that you could say Shema in any language. Are we to infer from there that everywhere else in the Torah you have to read only in Hebrew, but Shema could be said in any language? Because otherwise, why would it say Shema? The sages learned from the word Shema, any language you understand. Are we to see from there that everywhere else must be said only in the Holy Tongue? And our answer is we need it to say Shema. So, and even if we assume the entire Torah could be read in any language, the expression Shema, which means to hear, is still necessary for the following reason. It might have occurred to you to say that the word V'hayu means that Shema must be said only in Hebrew, like Rebbe taught that Shema is only in the Holy Tongue. So therefore, the Torah says here, it rejects the notion that Shema must be recited in any language. And this concludes the discussion of Shema. So the halacha is that Shema must be said in at least the first pasuk, but you're yotze if you said it in any language that you understand.
Well, tell me.
Because halacha is like the rabbi, is like the chachamim.
Actually, tell me if you're, if I imagine something, Rebbe's exact lesson was speaks about
Correct.
as it's written. Could it be actually that people might have thought actually that since you're adapting the Shema as opposed to reading it from the Torah, therefore it doesn't have to be in Hebrew. So Rebbe said, no, it has to be as written. Am I into something?
And so you're saying that because you're saying it by heart and you're not reading the Torah, so you could say it differently.
Yeah, it's the Rebbe saying, no, exactly as it's written in the Torah.
Perhaps, yeah, that's a valid point. One last point, the Aruch HaShulchan. Aruch HaShulchan, he was a Russian rabbi, actually, or Ukrainian, but that was part of Imperial Russia back then. He was in times of the Mittler Rebbe and the Tzemach Tzedek. And he wrote sort of a version of Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It's sort of a cross between the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch and the Kitzur Shulchan Aruch. It's like a precursor, you could say, of the Mishnah Brura. Was pretty popular in Russia.
The author of the Aruch HaShulchan made a Kitzur.
The Aruch HaShulchan is sort of like it's a Sefer of Halacha,
Yes,
in Shulchan Aruch style. And so he says that, I think his last name was Epstein.
Yeah, Epstein, yeah.
He was a Rav in Babroisk. I don't remember. He had some long discussions with the Tzemach Tzedek, and learning very deep discussions. I actually have an Aruch HaShulchan in English. Maybe we'll.
Oh, an Aruch HaShulchan in English?
Yeah.
I never heard of such a thing.
So the Aruch HaShulchan, he writes that Shema has to be said in order. That we learned according to Rebbe and the rabbis, they both agree Shema must be said in order. It does not have to be said in order of paragraphs. You could say the second paragraph of Vahaya before the first paragraph of Shema, and then go and say Vayomer after, because it's from three different parashas in the Torah. One is in Parashas Shalach, that's where Vayomer is from, the Tzitzis. Shema is from Parashas Veschanan, and V'hayim Shemoya is from Parashas Ekev. There's from three different parashas. But every paragraph has to be said in order itself. Meaning you have to go Shema to Levi Shorecha in order. V'hayim Shemoya to Allah Aretz in order. What about the third paragraph? Vayomer Hashem, Tani Hashem Elekechem, Emes. Do you have to say that in order as well, or not? Or can you say that out of order? Because it's not really part of the mitzvah of Shema. The mitzvah of Shema is only the first two paragraphs. Shema Yisrael, three opinions. Is it only the first pasuk, Shema and Baruch Shem? Is it Shema till Visharecha? Third opinion that it's Shema till Allah Aretz, the end of the second paragraph. Third paragraph of Vayomer is not part of the mitzvah of Shema at all. The reason why we say it is because there's a mitzvah to mention leaving Egypt every single day. And therefore, it ends off, the last pasuk is, Ani Hashem Elokechem asher etzesi eschem me'eretz Mitzrayim. I am Hashem who took you out of Egypt. Ani Hashem Elokechem, I am Hashem your God. And with that, we conclude, we finished 248 words to make it 248 limbs of the body. However, it's not part of the mitzvah of saying Shema. And it does not say the word Hayu hadvarim ha'ela, these words should be, does not say that about the third paragraph. Hadvarim ha'ela, these words is the words of Shema, not the words of Vayomer. Do you have to, so does this rule that the second, that the paragraphs have to be said in order apply to the paragraph of Vayomer as well? So the Aruch HaShulchan brings down certain poskim which say that since the Chachamim, the rabbis, are the ones who instituted the Say Vayomer, so therefore the same rules that would apply to the first two paragraphs would apply to the third paragraph as well. And the Mishnah Brura writes the same thing as Aruch HaShulchan, that Vayomer also has to be said in order, and if you said it out of order, you have to re-say it again. Okay, we'll do a few more minutes now of Kuntres Umaayon, some ideas of month of Elul. Now, we concluded the idea of Kriya Shema, saying how Kriya Shema has to be said in Hebrew and said in order, and of course, said it audibly, that you can actually hear it. It's also an important thing in davening. It's something to help you increase your kavanah, even to the extent that it says during Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, if somebody's davening too loud in shul, you can tell them be quiet. Right? If you can hear them more than 4 amas away, 4 cubits away. On Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, you're not allowed to tell them be quiet, because kol ma'ireh kavanah, the voice, awakens your kavanah better. And Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur are days of we have to daven with extra kavanah, so therefore you can't quiet someone who's davening very loud in shul on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So it's important to obviously say the words out loud and to make sure that you could hear the words. According to Chassidus, the words that you say have an effect in the world. And if you do it without volume, without sound, without putting decibels in it, it's not going out to the world. Every word that you say makes waves. And the waves, we know from today, modern technology, even we know this over 100 years ago, Pittsburgh was the very first radio station in the entire US, right? KDKA was the first radio station in the whole United States, right? If I potentially would have a satellite, putting it, I don't know, let's say, however many light years, 100 light years away from here, just now, it would be picking up the first broadcast of the first, maybe now 105 years, whatever it is, 1917 or something. But picking up the first broadcast of KDKA now. Why? Because those waves never went away. They're still around. And they last forever. And it has an effect wherever it is.
But just like it said, that after all of these centuries, we're all breathing some of the air of which Julius Caesar said we were assassinated et tu brute. As your breath travels around the world, but eventually we'll have a piece of it.
Exactly. But when it comes to Kedusha, holiness, holiness is a very powerful light. If you have a lot of darkness, one candle could take care of a lot of darkness. One flashlight could illuminate the whole area. Especially the light of a mitzvah or light of Torah for sure illuminates. So you can imagine every word of Torah that you say has an effect out there in the world. And it illuminates the world in a very large way, and it's permanent. And if you want to affect the world, you need to use your words out loud. And especially when you hear it to your ears, you want to elevate every part of you, including listening, your ears. So we're holding here in Kuntres, Umaayon, Maamar Chav Daled, Maamar 24, chapter Bais, chapter 2. Umimoitza davar anu yodim. And we can learn from the entire topic. Just one place in here. The whole iyin is lapshus b'hamazolis. The sarim el yonim shaykh rak ba'olam hasiya. Hislapshus he gam came the seder v'adragad. Tchilu mislabish ha'ar l'bush el mavriya v'nispar la'el Shema dayin chesed b'chinas ruchnin gabe mata. Only in the physical world, there's 4 worlds. That's Silas Bria Tzira Nasiya, page 344. Only in the lowest world could we experience physicality, but in order to experience spirituality in this physical world, it has to go through a process for us to make it audible, make it on a frequency, the spirituality in a frequency that we can understand. In the world of Atzilus, we explained, Hashem's goodness is spiritual. It's all spiritual in the world of Atzilus. In this physical world, the light of Hashem, the kindness of Hashem has gone through so many iterations and so many changes and minimizations and coverings that finally you could have a little bit through the medium of physical means, whether it's the sun, the moon, the stars, the air that we breathe, that we can actually have kindness being given to us. But Hashem's light is very hidden. In the higher worlds, Hashem's light cannot be perceived by lower beings. Only in this lowest world, Hashem's light is hidden. Then it could go into physical constellations and physical garments. And this is what it says, a Pri Etz Chaim, Reb Chaim Vital's statement in the Pri Etz Chaim from the Arizal. And this is tying back to what we had at the beginning of Maamar Hatzvi-Bais. The Kel Adnai, Nasiyahu b'gematria tzav, v'ein tzav ella chulu. We said that two names of Hashem, Kel. Yesterday, Dovi figured out Kel is 31.
Yep.
How much was Adnai? Aleph Daled Nun Yud.
96.
Together they're 96. 65 plus 31 is 96. So the new two names of Hashem, Kel and Adnai, these two names together make up the gematria of 96. And he says that the word Sav in the Torah refers to idolatry. I did not command you to bow to idols. So how could this be? These are two great names of Hashem. In the month of Elul, we have the revelation of the Gimel Midas Arachimim, the 13 attributes of mercy, which start out with the word Kel. It's a very great name of Hashem. Kel Rachum V'Chanon. Hashem is a merciful God. Aleph Daled Nun Yud Ad Hashem is also a name of Hashem, the master of all beings. How could we say that these are the source of idol worship? Names of Hashem. And the reason it is like that is because the light of Hashem, the kindness, goes through a process, and it goes in the sackcloth, meaning a rough garment. It comes finally into this physical world after going through so many worlds and minimizations, until finally in this own world, in this world, they exist. And it's possible that a person could have the illusion to think that the sun has its own power, or the moon has its own power. And godliness is completely concealed, and therefore the two names of Hashem make a gematria of Kel and Adnai together, 96, which refers to idolatry, idol worship. Hagam, the Kel Adnai and Shemus Kedoshim, although these two names of Hashem are holy divine names, since through these names Hashem is merciful and therefore creates the system of worlds, and Ad Hashem, Aleph Daled Nun Yud, means that Hashem is master on the world. Master means that there is a slave or servant, meaning that there is worlds underneath. So through these names of Hashem, the light of Hashem comes down through many levels till the mazalis, till the constellations, Shemasirim Legamri, which completely conceal the light of Hashem, and Shenersin Makim, and it gives, and it leaves room for the possibility, Lechashram, to people to give importance to them, for people to consider them as a benefactor and to consequently worship them. And therefore, the name of Hashem, which affects this, is the numerical value of the word tzav. Now, Hashem makes his light concealed for a good reason. Because what would happen if Hashem's light would not be concealed?
We would disappear.
We would disappear. It would stop existing. Right? So it's not like it's a bad thing. that Hashem's light is concealed. It's a good thing. We exist. We can do mitzvahs now. Otherwise, there's nothing doing. No mitzvahs and no existence.
But yet, we can exist in this world with angels, I mean, might not have happened now, but in times past.
Right. That
So,
angels could be in this world.
yes.
Right. So I'm saying,
Some type of step down, the energy or whatever you call it.
this problem is not with the angels. The problem is with our generation, that we're not on the level to see angels.
What did Abraham actually realize they were angels, or thought they came and told him, you're gonna have a son and so forth, and
Avram, in the beginning, he thought they were people. Only later on was revealed that they were angels. But an angel has a mission to do. He's only sent for a mission.
did they physically tell him, or somehow did he say, I'm an angel from Hashem, or did he figured out, I don't know, he felt it on his own or whatever. I don't know, I can't even answer that.
That's a good question. Before we finish, I just want to know, what's the story with Monday, Labor Day? Are people open to a shir on Monday?
Yeah.
Sure, yeah,
You're open to shir on Monday?
yep,
Okay, great.
Cancel for it.
You're not going to cancel Torah for Labor Day.
yep.
All right. I have a Tzivos Hashem rally starting at 12, so maybe we'll finish then 11:45 on Monday. On Monday for the kids, there's a program at 12, a rally. It's for Chai Elul, and it's for the Shloshim also of the Markel boy. So I'm starting at 12 in Yeshiva, so maybe we'll finish a little bit earlier on Monday. Maybe we'll start. I'm okay starting earlier, 10:30. What?
10:30 is fine.
10:30 is fine with everyone?
Could you pick us up? This call Boca and that doesn't end until 10:15
Okay,
on Monday.
on Monday. Okay, so I'm saying it's over there. It's also right. If so, I can pick you up. I'll pick you up. Yeah.
This Monday is no mail, which means no bills.
There's no checks either.
Right, the best days. The best holiday is a bank holiday. So it's really a kindness from Hashem. And this is the purpose of creation, that Hashem concealed his light, but it's imperative for us to find the light in the darkness. Summary, Kitzer, Hamazalos, Himrak Shluchim, the constellations, which can mean a constellation, or can mean anything which gives you a parnasa, whether it's your field, whether it's your job, whether it's your boss. They're only the means, Legashem Hashefah, to make Hashem's kindness manifest in a physical state. Haba me'ita yisbarech, and it all comes from Hashem. And one who bows down to the sun, to the moon, or to any other power, is serving idols. For the world to operate and exist the way Hashem wants is Hashem concealing his godly light. The names of Hashem, Kel and Adonai are Gematria 96 of the word Sav, and it's a complete concealment, and it gives the place for an error, to give the constellations or any other powers as independent powers. Therefore, Sav refers to idolatry because it can lead to idolatry. From Maamar Chafei and onwards, it's now going to speak much more practical sense for the next Chafei and Chavav and Chavzayin, Maamar 25, 26, 27, and then Maamar 28 is very short, and it's sort of a recap of what should we walk away with from the entire Kuntres Umaayon. And